Welcome back to another AD&D Toolkit tutorial video. This one is going to be another class-based video on the Thief and Assassin in 1st edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. So starting out with the Thief, let's see where I'm going to go here. So first we're going to talk about abilities, or an ability, which is often a good place to start when you're talking about classes, because you want to make sure that you have a good score in the primary ability or abilities of whatever class you are working towards. So with thieves, it is clearly dexterity. That's their primary ability. If they do have, it's 15 or 16, I think it's 15. If they have 15 or higher, they get a plus 10% to their XP earned. But as you're going to see, dexterity has way more, there are way better and more important reasons to have high dexterity if you are a thief. Dexterity is great all around, as you can see from this table right here at the beginning of the player's handbook, page 11. It applies to all classes that they get a defensive adjustment based on their dex, and that equates to an armor class bonus. So anybody who can improve armor class, of course, that's a huge boon. A class like a thief, who can only wear up to leather armor and no shields, having higher dex and an AC bonus, is excellent to improve upon that poor armor defensiveness that they have. Also of benefit from having a high dex is you do get bonuses, as you see here, on attack rolls or to hit rolls on the 20-sided die when attacking at range. So using bows, longbows, crossbows, that kind of stuff. So that's the first thing regarding dexterity, or first things. Also, when it comes to thieves, you'll see here on the next page, on page 12, they list here thieving skills that actually also benefit or can be penalized from dexterity adjustments. And when we hit up to, starting at 16 dexterity, you'll get plus 5% when you're trying to open a lock. At 17, you get 5% bonus to picking pockets, 10% to locks, and so forth. You can read the chart. 18 gives significant bonuses across the board. So dexterity is crucial for a thief. And a couple of other items I'm going to point out too regarding, actually, while we're on it, I'm just going to go straight there. So dexterity also factors into dual wielding, using more than one weapon, using a weapon in each hand. So let me get over to Dungeon Master's Guide for 1st edition. And I have mentioned in numerous videos in the past, I typically suggest that players do not read the Dungeon Master's Guide. It was also suggested that way from the authors, Gygax. And you don't want to be turning the game into nothing but number crunching. Keep the mystery alive and enjoy the role play aspects of it. You don't want to know all of the ins and outs of the numbers, but this one paragraph here that I've highlighted, we could take a look at this. This is something that players ought to be privy to. So as I said, dexterity is critical for thieves for a number of reasons. We discussed a few of them already. But when it comes to dual wielding, any player, any class can opt to dual wield. Instead of using a shield in your offhand, you can use a secondary weapon. Now that secondary weapon can only be a hand axe / throwing axe, which I think does 1 to 6 damage against human-sized creatures, or a dagger, one of the two, in 1st edition at least. When you do use, your primary hand can be pretty much any one-handed weapon. When you are dual wielding, you're going to get penalties to both of your hands when it comes to attack rolls. And so they say here, well, they do tell you second weapon must be either a dagger or a hand axe. When you use a second weapon, this causes the character to attack. His primary weapon is at -2 onto hit rolls. That's the primary that you normally would have no penalties at. And the secondary weapon is at -4. So with those kinds of penalties on attack rolls, really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to dual wield. I would think I'd much rather have the benefit of a shield. But in the case of a thief who cannot employ a shield, and we're going to show you that momentarily when we go back to the player's handbook, they can't use shields at all. So they have a free hand. Might as well stick a weapon in it if you didn't have to deal with these penalties. Now, this brings us to the next point they show you. These penalties can be reduced based upon the reaction or attacking adjustments shown in the player's handbook due to dexterity. So if you continue on reading here, if the dexterity of the player is above 15, you start getting downward adjustments to those penalties. And when you get up to, say, an 18 dexterity, you get a -1 on the offhand weapon attack roll and 0 or no penalty at all on the primary. So if you can get a thief with high dex, they can't use a shield anyway, and you can mitigate the penalties to dual wielding, especially at 17 and 18 dex, I think it makes a heck of a lot of sense to get a second weapon into the hands of a thief who, again, can't use a shield and inherently should have high dexterity. It's just a great tool for them to leverage. With any other class, like say a fighter who might just happen to have high dexterity, you're trading off that shield, right? So a thief who doesn't have a shield to trade off, it's even more of an automatic that you would want to put a second weapon in there if you're not going to suffer too high of a penalty. So I did want to run over to the DMG to point that out to you, that there are numerous reasons high dexterity is good for a thief. You get the XP bonus, you have bonuses to skills, the thieving skills, you of course get the dexterity and missile attack roll bonuses, the armor class and missile attack bonuses that all classes get, and dual wielding. So high dex. You want high dex more than anything else for thieves. Alright, that being said, we're then going to move on to a quick discussion of races. And as you can see here, thieves can be of any race. Doesn't matter which one you want to be, they all qualify. Now, that being said, the half-orc thief is limited to a maximum of 8th level. And that is only if they have 18 dexterity. If you read this little footnote down here, that max level reduces if they are below 18 dexterity. So you do want to keep that in mind when it comes to the half-orc. They are pretty significantly limited on their max levels here, but no other race is. So they're all good. But it doesn't mean they're all equal. I'm going to get into that in a moment. No, we're going to get into that now. Halflings and elves, by nature of their race, inherently get a dexterity bonus. The trade-off is the halfling gets a minus to strength and the elf gets a minus to constitution. But that dexterity bonus is pretty big for the reasons we have just discussed about dexterity. So I would consider them strong contenders, those two races, when you are electing to be a thief. And remember, unlike multi-classing or a lot of other demi-human classes, demi-human thieves they're unlimited other than the half-orc. They have no max to their level limits. So good choice when it comes to a thief to go non-human, because there are a lot of other bonuses that come with being a demi-human, which we're going to get into for the elf and the halfling, since they do have that dex bonus. Before we do, I do want to point out here on this chart, you're going to see the the ability max minimums for each race. And a couple I want to point out, the elf is able to get up to 19, the only race that can in dexterity, whereas the dwarf and the half-orc are limited to 17 max. So you want to consider that strongly when you're picking a race. And so what this means here is if you happen, this 19 for the elf, if you happen to roll 3 6s, or if you, whatever your protocol is, if you get a natural 18 for your ability and dexterity, you then apply the +1 racial bonus for an elf, you can start out with a 19 dex on a thief. That's fantastic. To really get the benefits of this, you would want to read the Deities and Demigods book to see what happens when you exceed 18 in an ability like dexterity. It's in the beginning of that book, but significant. So that's something really to consider if you do roll natural 18 dexterity for your thief. Here, 2. All right, so again, when it comes to races, I mentioned the elf and the halfling because you do get that dexterity bonus, but there's other reasons to strongly consider one of those two, in my opinion. And some of those reasons are listed here in the racial narratives on page 16, starting on page 16. So the elf, they get a bunch of bonuses like resistance to sleep and charm, but ones that particularly relate to thieves, in my opinion, would be they have infravision. All right, so thieves can do things like move silently, hide in shadows, and so forth, right? They have high dexterity, so they would be a likely candidate for doing any kind of scouting ahead of the party, or even maybe lagging behind of the party if they think they're being followed or something like that. Having infravision, particularly indoors and underground, like in a dungeon, can be fantastic when you're scouting because you don't need a light source. Now, bear in mind, underground in a dungeon, lots, if not most of the monsters down there have infravision of their own, so the elven thief is not protected from their sight, but they don't need a torch or a light source to do that scouting in the darkness. So, not a game changer, but is significant. They also do have an innate ability to detect secret and concealed doors, which, any elven class gets that bonus, but it does really tie into the mystique and the wheelhouse of a thief. So as far as RP value, I like this a lot too. And for that scouting, when they're scouting ahead, they might pick up on secret portals and concealed portals while scouting an area out for the party. So another bonus to consider. And this one too, very good. When not in metal armor, which thieves are, thieves can only wear up to leather armor. They can't carry shields. So they're already hamstrung by that lack of metal armor. Take advantage of it. Elves have a 1 in 4 chance of causing surprise to others when they're alone and not in metal armor. So this is a big bonus that they also have the reduced chance of, in lighter case, the chance for surprise drops. Okay, so when they do have to open a door, they're talking about here. But in any event, elves, when they're scouting ahead, can get that surprise jump on the enemy, which will give them a chance to, likely what they would want to do is flee. If they're caught alone scouting up ahead, they want an opportunity to get back to the party, let's say. But so some of the, like I said, racial abilities here for the elf just really play well into not only the RP value, but the practical value of thieves. Halflings do similarly, and I'm going to show you that now. When we get down to the halflings, they also have infravision, which is noted here. Helpful in the dark. They also have a natural resistance to poisons of all sorts, and it's pretty damn significant. It's based upon their constitution score, which a thief does not necessarily have a high score in. But if you do, it's a really good idea to consider being a halfling because these are the bonuses. So these bonuses they're talking about here apply to saves versus magical spells, magic resistance and whatnot based upon the constitution. But in the next paragraph it reads, these bonuses also apply to poisons of all sorts. So these are often detecting traps, removing traps, right? Like poison needles and so forth. It would be OP to have a significant resistance to poison if that's going to be part of your job. So halfling thieves are great for that reason. Several reasons, right? But that one's a unique one. And how it works is if your constitution score is 7 to 10, right? Low to low average, they get a +2 on saves versus poison, halflings. 11 to 13, still in the average range, they get a +3 on their saves. +4 from 14 to 17, and +5 at 18. Very significant for saving throws against poison. So you definitely want to consider them if you're going to be playing a thief. So they do have the saves versus poison bonus. They have the infravision we talked about. They also have this ability to surprise others and move silently, just like the elves do when they're not in metal armor and they're operating alone and so forth. So great for their scouting. So I did just want to point those things out in regards to elven and halfling thieves. All right, so from there, let's move on to weapons and armor, which we have listed here. You'll see the thief, they get a d6 for their hit die type, and they stop rolling at level 10. After that, they add, I believe it's 2 hit points per level, but we'll double check that. All right, weapons, they are fairly limited. The only ranged weapons they can get, well, a sling. And a sling's a pretty darn good ranged weapon, especially if you're using metal bullets. They got very good range on them. Damage is slightly less than a bow or crossbow. But they're legitimate weapons. They don't get the same rate of fire as, say, longbows that get, 2 shots per round. They only get the 1. But they're pretty good weapons when it comes to range weaponry. They also can chuck a dart or a dagger, which is very short-ranged. But they do have the option. And then club and swords. Usually swords are going to be a go-to for a thief. Mind you, they cannot use the bastard or two-handed sword. The 4 asterisks here will note. So short sword, broadsword, long sword, but not the bastard or two-handed. So you do want to keep that in mind. So they're fairly limited, like I said, on weapons, but they can use, your average swords, which is also going to mean they can make use of a lot of magical swords, which are usually long swords, right? So the common swords are available to them. Armor, they're also very limited on. They can only wear up to leather. So that means they're wearing nothing, or padded or leather. That's pretty much their options. And then you can see, like most everyone else, they can use flaming oil and poisons. They got the question mark based on alignment there. We're going to talk about that now as we get into the narrative for the thief class. So towards the end. There we go. All right, so before, so I think it was a 15 at 15 dexterity or higher, they gain that 10% bonus. 15 dexterity. They get the bonus to their XP. Alignment is a little bit limited. They don't have to be evil. They generally have to be neutral or evil on the good versus evil scale, though they can be, it says here, rarely they can play neutral good if they wish. But lawful, neutral, or chaotic on that continuum is fine. It's really that good versus evil continuum where they tend to be neutral or evil. So you could not do chaotic good or lawful good for a thief. It just doesn't happen. If you want it to be of good alignment, it's got to be neutral. They use their D6 for their HD. And then here's some of the abilities they can do. So we talked about these a little bit. Picking pockets is just what it sounds like. They can attempt to take something out of a bag or a pocket of some other NPC or player. And they're going to roll for these skills that we're going to talk about here. They are listed on the thieving chart here. So actually, before I go back to the narratives, let's just take a quick look at this. You're going to see anytime they attempt to pick pockets, open locks, these are the skills they're trying to make use of, and this is the level of the thief. This would be the percentage chance of success. So at level 1, a thief has 30% chance of picking a pocket. 30 or less, they succeed, right? 25 or less, they can open a lock, and so forth. So that's how you read this table. We're going to go back to the narrative to describe each of these skills in a little more detail, but I do also want to point out the racial bonuses and penalties they have here. So for instance, an elf gets 5% bonus when they attempt to pick pockets, minus 5% penalty when they try to open a lock. You'll see mostly there's bonuses here. So picking locks, that's their weak spot. Where the halflings actually have their weaknesses are in climbing walls and reading languages, which I would argue probably climbing walls one tends to get abused a lot. But in any event, and read language is not as big a deal. I would tend to say, based upon the higher bonuses they get, and they get bonuses in all the other skills, halflings, again, very strong thieves. I like them. I think that's all I want to show you here. Yeah, so we're going to go back to the narrative and discuss their skills in a little more detail here. Opening locks is so on a treasure chest or a door, picking a lock, and you would refer to the table below to see if they can succeed at that or not. And by the way, with these thieving skills, as much as I can, I like to provide players with agency so that they do their own rolling. They prefer that usually too. But when it comes to skills, the DM wants to do this, and you usually want to try to do this quietly. The reason is, let's say for, let's go into hiding in shadows here. Thieves can attempt to blend into dark areas, it says, right? Especially this is good when they're like in the darkness of like a dungeon, right? There's going to be torchlight maybe that the party is following along, but there's going to be a lot of shadows in the corners and the perimeters, depending on the size and shapes of rooms. But this is a skill they have, that they can blend into the shadows and kind of disappear from view if they can stay very, very still. The thief is not going to necessarily, or likely is not going to know if they succeeded at hiding from someone in the shadows. It's up to that other individual upon whether they detect the thief attempting that hide or not. So you, as the dungeon master, want to roll the percentile dice to see if they succeed or not, and then decide how you're going to handle it if they fail at hiding. You know, a more intelligent monster, well, let's say a less intelligent monster might just charge them and attack, whereas a more intelligent monster might try to draw them out or something, or catch them unawares when they get closer, that type of thing. So you, the DM, want to know if they fail or succeed at that hide. Players should not know that. Or any of these, most, if not all of these skills. The DM should be doing these rolls. Finding and removing traps should make another argument for that too. When it comes to finding a trap, if there's a poison needle, you don't want to say, hey, this chest you're attempting to pick the lock on, first I want you to roll to see if you find the trap or not. Right? Because now you're giving away there's a poison needle trap there. So you, the DM, should be doing that quietly. That's one that's got to be done quietly, because if the thief says they're going to try and pick a lock, and then they see you multiple times rolling the dice, that might clue them into, wait a minute, there's a trap here. Right? Picking a lock, I believe, I'm trying to think now because I'm having a brain fart, but I think I usually, allow my players to do their own rolls for picking locks, because they know they're making the attempt, and they're going to know immediately the result if they succeed or fail. So again, more importantly here is why you want to be silent with that detecting a trap, because if they're rolling, the player's rolling to see if they can successfully pick the lock, and you jump the gun and roll for finding the trap before they roll for picking the lock, they're going to know that you're probably rolling because there's a trap here, and they're going to stop what they're doing, or, you're cluing them in. So you want to do these types of rolls quietly. But finding a trap and then removing a trap are separate rolls to see if you succeed at detecting it or finding it, and then if you do find it, if you're able to remove it. And they detail here that really pertains to relatively small mechanical devices, so not magical traps or things like that, or large stone traps, say. This is more for traps revolving around locks and portals, maybe. Moving silently is just what it sounds like, and that will often be used in tandem maybe with another ability like backstabbing or hiding in shadows. Maybe they'll attempt to hide in the shadows first, have somebody walk past them unawares that they're hiding, and then once they're at the rear of that party, start following behind them silently. And again, you don't want them to know if they're heard or not. In a real life experience, they might make a little bit of noise with their foot dragging or shuffling on the floor or hitting a squeaky board, as it says here. And then it's up to the person, the potential target, if they want to let on that they heard someone behind them or not, right? So you, the DM, want to do those rolls secretly, if not even quietly or silently. All right, so that's their major skills here, and then they talk about a few more abilities further on. They can listen at doors. Actually, anybody can listen at doors, windows, and so forth. But it is an improved ability for thieves. Ascending and descending vertical surfaces. Talking about climbing walls, and as I said, that's on the table down here. You can see their percentage chance of doing that successfully. And that assumes that there are some kind of footholds, cracks, or rough surface to a wall. In the DMG, there are tables for determining if a thief were to fall or something from an attempt at climbing walls. Their percentages for success and failure based upon the slipperiness of the walls and so forth. So there's a little more to it than just using the percentage dice here. And then backstabbing they're talking about here. Now, backstabbing is another one that can easily get abused. Backstabbing is very potent. It will do double damage per every 4 experience levels of the thief. So at level 1 to 4, the thief is going to do double their damage on a backstab. So if they're using a long sword, which does 1 to 8 damage, you're going to do 2 to 16 damage on a successful backstab at level 1 to 4 thief. Level 5 to 8, they do triple damage and so forth, quadruple at 9 to 12. So huge damage you can get with a backstab from a competent thief. Now, in order to get a backstab, they discuss this again in the DMG. There's a few factors the Dungeon Master needs to consider. One is the thief at the rear of that individual. Right, they got to be in their back in order to backstab. They also have to be able to, I believe, be undetected in their approach, which can be much more difficult than it sounds like. So you do want to keep that in mind. We'll take a look at that in the DMG in a little bit. They also show you here that when striking by surprise, so again, that scenario I was talking about before, if the thief is able to successfully, say, hide in shadows, and a party moves past them, and then if they successfully can move silently from behind up to this creature and gain surprise, they get a +4 also on their to hit die roll, which is huge. So backstab can be very potent, but tricky to pull off. You can't just every combat encounter say, I as a thief, I'm going to be, employing backstab. Not that simple. At level 4, thieves are able to read 20% of languages, and it goes up 5% with each level after that. So basically, if they come across a note or a map written in a language they don't know in their list of languages, they can roll percentile dice, and based upon their level, they've got a pretty significant chance of just being able to figure out what's said. They'll miss some words here and there, but they can get the gist of it if it's a successful roll. They also have the opportunity, I think that, it's discussed here. At 10th level, they also have the opportunity to be able to read and make use of scrolls, magic scrolls, all caster classes except for a cleric. So they can with druids, but not clerics, even though the druid is a subclass of clerics. So magic users, illusionists, and druids, they can read their scrolls once they hit 10th level and actually cast the spells. Now, because they're not magically inclined in their nature, by the nature of their class, they do have a 25% chance of just failing at this spell. The spell would still be used or erased from the scroll, but they would fail at casting it. They also note that there's an increasing chance per level of the spell. So if it's a 1st level spell, this wouldn't be a very high chance. But if it's a 5th level spell, there's a more significant chance of the reverse of the intent of the spell from the scroll actually occurring. So like if they were trying to read, say, from a druid scroll, a healing, cure light wound spell, the reverse could happen of cause light wounds, which of course you don't want to take that risk if you can avoid it. Now the problem here is in no other location, as far as I know, and I'm pretty certain of this, there's no other, this is all they say in regards to this point. they say an increasing chance per level of the reverse happening, right? But there's no table or base percentage or how much does it increment per level the chance that the reverse is going to occur. And I've read around the internet a lot over time. I've seen some people who have even said they talked to Gygax about this at some point, like at a convention or something. And basically, the best anybody that I've ever spoke to was able to get out of this was use your judgment. There is no table anywhere for it. So actually, it was use your judgment or ignore that part altogether and just go with a base 25% chance of it failing. So I am sure, like everything else, there are some DMs that have their own system for determining if the reverse is used. I'm going to leave that up to you to discuss with your DM. But this is what is clear, 25 base chance that any thief attempting to use a magical scroll will just fail. They misunderstand the scroll, can't use it, but I apply that penalty of the spell being used from the scroll. Right, they do talk here about how thieves cannot build strongholds, but they can build a fortified building and they will attract followers, so it is very similar to a stronghold. If they do have such a headquarters set up, it will be at odds with any other local thieving guild. And you can just read a little bit about that here. That's at higher levels, minimum 10th level, before they can start entertaining that type of play. They very quickly gain levels early on, and they maintain a pretty fast rate throughout. You'll see that to attain level 10, they need 160,001. And there's not many that beat that. The druids, surprisingly, or at least to me, it was surprising that they do. I know none of the fighters do. A cleric, I don't think does. No, cleric is 450. Yeah, so I think maybe only the druid advances to 10th level as quickly as a thief. Just gonna double check that. Illusionists are 220, and magic users are 250. Yeah, I think the illusionist would be next. And just going to check the monks. No, they're pretty long, 500,000. So yeah, second best in the game to reach level 10. They're very quick. And quick early on too, like I said. So pretty much throughout, they advance through their levels very quickly, which is great because that's going to allow them to keep getting better attack tables or better results on their attack tables, and they're going to get increased HP, which is going to allow them to be a little more engaged in combat because they'll be advancing quicker than the fighters. So yeah, they can just have a better chance of some more survivability when they're attacking in melee combat. So I think that might be all I wanted to read. Well, no, I guess we'll go through some of these abilities here. They talk about them in a little more detail. They also talk about these in a little more detail in the DMG, so maybe we'll take a quick look at that too. So for picking pockets, I know they know in the DMG that they're allowed to make multiple attempts. I think it's 2 attempts per round. They can keep trying. I don't think there's anything else listed in here that we need to know about. Opening locks may be attempted by any given thief only once until they level again. And once they level again, then they can attempt that same lock again. So it gets kind of tricky. You're probably not going to make use of that second or third attempt unless it's an item, like maybe a small lockbox or a chest that you were able to take with you. And if a thief couldn't open it, all right, well, we'll wait till the thief levels up and let him try it again. So that is something to bear in mind. Finding and removing traps. As it notes here, as I had said earlier, you're going to roll for each of those functions separately. So first, a percentage roll to see if they find the trap, and then if they do, if they're able to successfully remove it. If they attempt to pick a lock or remove a trap, well, let me back up and just say this a little more clearly. If there's a lock, let's say on a chest, that the lock is locked and it's trapped, let's say a poison needle, okay? If a thief attempts to pick it, you have to silently roll to see if they fail and the trap, the needle, hits them. They trigger it. Or even if they attempt to remove it, you again have to roll to see if they can successfully do that and avoid the consequence of that trap. Before they can attempt to remove it, you've got to roll and see if they actually find it. So usually you're going to be doing those rolls as the DM quietly behind the scenes. And again, only one try per thief is allowed. And they say success means they deactivate the trap safely, no consequences, no damage, or what have you. If they fail, it's triggered. Moving silently can be attempted each time that the thief moves. They can approach an area or a creature, and often that's going to be used to approach for a backstab, because again, to attempt a backstab, the target can't know the thief is within range, is around, or that backstab is just going to fail because they're going to be, they're going to keep moving, glancing behind themselves. Even if they're fighting somebody else in front of them, it's not going to be so easy to set up that backstab unless the thief has not been detected prior to the attempt. Hiding in shadows. It cannot be accomplished under direct observation, or really even under indirect. So if the target that the thief is attempting to hide from notice the thief, even out of the side of their eye, the thief isn't able to, they can't just like magically meld into the shadows. It's just a very natural thing where they're just very good. They wear dark clothing, they know how to stay very still, and they know how to work shadows. They know where they can be hidden in the dark and where they won't. So it's a skill. It's not any kind of magic, and it cannot be employed if you were seen going into that shadow or moving within the shadow. So they need to stay absolutely still, and they need to do it when they're not being observed by the target. So often this has to be done before the target, say, enters the room or the area. Hearing noise is, as they say, simply listening intently. You do have to apply some time. That headgear has to come off. And I would assume a thief wearing leather armor would have some kind of leather, a helmet or a headgear that would need to be removed in order to listen. Just like listening at doors, you need to do the same thing. The thief themselves and any friendlies around them have to be quiet. In order to do this listening, it requires a full minute to listen. Climbing walls we talked about. There's a percentage for that. A score in excess of the percentage on the table up here indicates that the thief has slipped and fallen. And success indicates that they successfully were able to or safely ascend that wall. And reading languages we talked about earlier. Let's see, is there anything else I wanted to get into about the thief? There is actually in the DMG, as I said, I just want to go into here real quickly, where they do talk about, and I just want to find the pages. It might be in the 20s, like 27. Thieving abilities, they discuss them a little bit more. Thief abilities are 19. I knew it was early on. Alright, so in the Dungeon Master's Guide, they do have a little more on each of these thieving skills. They talk about backstabbing a little bit. Some of the caveats that are not discussed in the player's handbook. And for instance, some creatures, they say like slimes, molds, and so forth. Like a slime, it's just a big puddle of slime, right? They don't have a physical back. So there's no ability to backstab them. And there's a few creatures they list here like that, but there are others. It should be pretty self-explanatory. Anybody that does not have a back of some type, or anything, I should say, you can't attempt a backstab on them. Picking pockets, they say how additional attempts are allowed. The victim might notice, might not. We talked about this, right? That when you roll, the DM should roll the percentile dice and not necessarily let the thief know right away. if they've been discovered as trying to pickpocket. And they give an example here where an intelligent creature might attempt to let the thief even pick their pocket successfully in order to follow them back to their party or their headquarters or so forth. And it does note what I said to you earlier, 2 attempts of picking a pocket per round. Opening locks, they say, takes 1 to 10 rounds to do. Usually it's 1 to 4. The DM will determine that depending on the difficulty they want to apply to that lock. Finding and removing traps. Use the same requirements for opening locks to find and remove traps. And they just expressly note magical or magically hidden physical traps cannot be found with detecting or finding traps by a thief. Magic will stump them. Moving silently, they talk about rates of movement here and so forth. You can take a look at that. Hiding in shadows, they took a little bit more about. But again, it's really just, are they under observation or not? And I think they even do mention here about indirect observation as well as direct. Oh yeah, it does here. This, meaning hiding in shadows, is never possible under direct or even indirect observation. So if a creature can see you out of the corner of their eye, you can't hide in shadows. Right, so just keep that in mind as the DM, or the players too, if you're going to try and make an attempt. Hearing noises, as they say, pretty straightforward, and they do talk here about you must take off helmet or headgear in order to make an attempt at that. And really, like I said, any class can try and listen at doors. Certain races, each race gets a chance at doing that out of 20. Most of them are like 2 and 23 and 24 and 20 chance of successfully hearing a noise on the other side of a door. Thieves, they'll get that percentage table in their thieving skills from the player's handbook. Did I pass by the thieves? Oh, I'm totally lost as to where I'm going here. Yeah, I gotta go back this way. So for hearing noise, they just have, as they get to higher levels, they can have a better chance of doing it than some other races, say. And climbing walls, here's that table I was talking about. Is the surface slippery, slightly slippery? I'm sorry, not slippery, slightly or very slippery. And then the type of surface, is it smooth all the way up to very rough with ledges and projections? And then this table determines the distance of the distance they can travel per round, measured in feet when climbing a wall. And then reading language is pretty self-explanatory. We talked about the percentages for that from the player's handbook. Right, so the other thing I guess let's stick with the DMG for a moment. We'll go to the attack tables. Just bear with me a moment to try and find them. So thieves, while I'm looking for them, they perform, I think they're the next class you would say above magic users, so they're not very good as far as their attack tables go. But they can do alright, and they also rise slowly on those attack tables. I'm going the wrong way here. Because it's every 5 or 4, I think, levels. Right, so thieves in the set, every 4, 1 to 4, 5 to 8, 9 to 12. So they advance more slowly. But they do rise in levels quicker than most, right? We said only the druid really can at certain levels surpass them. Not early on, but later on the druid can. So their attack tables are not great, but they're okay, and they do get the use of swords, so they can be decent fighters. But this is again where if you dual wield, at least they have more damage potential and 2 attacks, right? Per round. So they get double the attempts. With that high dex, if they're dual wielding, hopefully they won't have much of a penalty on their to hit rolls. So they're moderate, I would say, at their attacking. With the high dexterity, it would make sense to use a ranged weapon. But they're quite limited on those ranged weapons. Really, it's the sling. If you're going to be using one, I would suggest. But having that high dexterity could give you a to-hit bonus on using that sling. So that is our attack tables. Saving throws, they're okay. Um, Saving throw should be the next page. Yeah, next page. And so you can look through this table here to see where they fall. They're all right. I guess that's pretty much everything I would want to cover on the thief, which would then bring us to the subclass of the thief that I really haven't talked about, which is the assassin, and here's the reason why. And I'm sorry this is going to be disappointing possibly to anybody who was looking to play an assassin. I'm not really going to cover them much. I don't really allow them much. And it's not even me as a DM. But so here's the first thing. Let's get to the assassins, and I'll show you numerous items, but one in particular that makes it difficult playing an assassin. Assassins, like, they're an interesting class. To me, they're interesting. And they could make cool NPCs, but they've really kind of, in a lot of the things they want to do, they need to operate alone, which is it's the antithesis of what first edition, like probably more than any other edition, I would say, of D&D. The first edition pushes group synergy and the group over the individual. You need to act well and balance well as a party to perform well. And the assassin doesn't work that way. They want to do a lot of their skills, which can be pretty cool skills, but they got to do them pretty solo. So it doesn't blend well in first edition with all the other classes that work off of each other and benefit from working together. Well, before I go on, I'll just stick with that. So, like, some of their major skills, spying, right? They need to kind of be doing that solo when they go on spying missions. Assassination, right? It's built into their name. It's their title attribute, you could say, or their title skill. Again, they need to be doing that solo if they're going to be assassinating another character or NPC. Poison, they don't necessarily have to be doing that solo, but there's a lot of negativity that comes with poison. Not only alignment issues with poisoning other humans, say, or humanoids, but even just like in the DMG, I'm not going to bother looking this up, I don't think, but because I'm not exactly sure what page it's on. But when assassins use poisoned weapons, say, if they take a poisoned weapon out in public, say in a town or something, even just the sight of a poisoned weapon, other characters can have a percentage chance of noting that it's a poisoned weapon. And if they do, then you got to roll the percentile dice to see how they handle it. They might just immediately attack that assassin, or they have a large chance for calling like the town guard, yelling out for help type of thing. So a lot of the fundamental skills that are cool about assassins just don't mesh well with a party. Another big one is the alignment. So I was talking about their skills there, but their alignment, they generally are going to be evil characters. Let me get to the beginning of the assassin narrative, because I don't know, maybe it is here that they talk about it. Oh, here, it's actually not the DMG. It's right here in the PHB. They talk about poisoned weapons when being used. They run the risk of being noticed by other people. All non-assassins within 10 feet of the bared weapon. So if they take a dagger out, say, of its sheath or out of a pocket or something, there's a 10% cumulative chance per melee round of it being visible, of some other person noting the poison on it. And they'll either attack that assassin or call out for the city watch. So it says a 20% chance for attacking the assassin, 50% chance for calling the watch, another 30% chance for just shouting for the watch, and then attacking the assassin, doing both. So it just, really doesn't play well with a party that generally parties like to play, good characters. Now, there are at times where you get a group that wants to play a neutral/evil party, and as DM, you might want to, allow for an assassin there. I would say probably a good chance you'll allow assassin to play there. I generally don't play that way. I've never had an evil or evil/neutral party. It's just not my way. I don't like that style of gaming. Haven't come across it. like I said, I know there are people who do, and that's where an assassin, I guess, could shine, but in my games, I just don't have them. But the alignment issue I was looking for, trying to find exactly where it talks about their alignment issues, because they have to be either neutral or evil. They can't be good. I just want to make sure I get this exactly right before I go telling you. Why am I having such a hard time finding this alignment declaration? Alright, so this is like a little bit of dead air I apologize for, because I am totally missing this. Combat tables. So they do make better fighters than thieves. Same combat tables, but they can use, I think, any weapon. They can poison those weapons. So they do fight better than thieves. That is something I just should point out as a bonus for them. So if you are running that evil party, again, assassin might be a good choice. They can make use of all thieving skills. So you might even want to substitute them for a thief or so. Why am I not finding these alignment restrictions? Here it is, right at the very beginning. And I missed it. Okay. So assassins are evil in alignment. They can, of course, be neutral in regards to lawful or chaotic, but they have to be evil. So that's going to run into a problem with a party. Like, if you have a ranger, they're going to be neutral good, right? So they're going to have a hard time working with an evil assassin. Paladins can't work with an evil character ever. So you can't have them in the same party. And just, again, in general, if you have a party with some good characters in it, they're not going to mesh well with an evil assassin, or at all with an evil assassin. And you can't do things like, and the authors get into this when they talk about paladins. You can't get slick as a player saying like, say you have a thief who wants to pick a pocket, right? And of a townsman or even a good aligned character, and you have a paladin in the party, you can't have the mage in the party say, hey, paladin boy, follow me over here, but I want to show you something in the shop. You can't distract the paladin or try and distract them from the thief doing something that's not a good act. That the DM should just not allow that kind of bending of the rules. If you got a lawful good paladin in the party, you just gotta behave. And that kind of goodness stuff, I would say, pertains to assassins too. That if you got a party of relatively good characters, neutral to good characters, and then this evil assassin who's going to want to be doing a lot of evil acts, the good players can't turn a blind eye to that. So I just find that assassins in my games, they don't work well, so I'm not really going to discuss them much. But they do operate very similarly to thieves in a lot of ways. We talked about all of the skills and whatnot that thieves have. Assassins are very similar, but you can read about them here. There are assassin tables when it comes to assassination in the DMG2 if you want to get into that. But I'm going to leave the assassin up to you if it's something you want to pursue. Discuss it with your DM. See if it's something that they do allow for into their campaign. But other than that, I hope this discussion was helpful for you. I hope it gave you some reasons to consider the thief. They are the ones you're going to want to have around, particularly in dungeons, because they can pick those locks and find traps, and it'll lead to a lot more loot. They do rise in levels pretty quickly. They do have some very good skills, and if you do pick a thief, I would strongly suggest you consider that the elf or the halfling as a race if you're going to be playing them, for the reasons we discussed earlier. And of course, lastly, make sure you got very high dex, as high as you can get that dexterity. That's what you want first and foremost for your thief. So looking forward to the next video, and I hope to have you watch it with me, and we'll see you again.